Great. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're going to kick off this morning with a great panel, but before I introduce my guests, I just want to give you a little sense of what you can expect over the next few days. We put this program together in an effort to continue to provide the HR community with the content that we think that you'll need in order to return to work, whatever that looks like for you. And we were just actually discussing that there is a lot of information out there, both on the very tactical level and then some at the more strategic level, as Governor Baker has sort of started to lift some of the restrictions and we're starting to roll back to work. The intent of this series is not to really provide a checklist or a lot of just tangible do's and don'ts for going back to work, but more it's set up as a conversation. So you'll see very few slides over the next few weeks and more of a live conversation like you'll experience this morning. We will have some slides, so if you come back and you're looking at some of this and weren't able to join us live, you'll have some things to reference back towards, but the intent is really that we've engaged with some subject matter experts. Most of them are HR professionals, because we know that other than our medical professionals, HR are sort of our frontline workers at this point and are leading us through this crisis. So I'm going to give you a sense of what the agenda will look like in the next few weeks, and then we'll dive right into this conversation with our CHROs. So later this morning we'll talk about our CHRO panel, and then we'll roll right into talking about sort of the emotional aspects of getting people back to work and the level of fear that people might be experiencing as they return to the office and trying to decide if and when to return. And then we'll take a little break, and then this afternoon we're going to talk about managing remote teams. So even though we're talking about going back to work, there are a large number of employers that are either going to stagger or may never really go back to fully everyone being in the same place anymore. And so managing remote teams and sort of picking up some of those projects that maybe you started before the pandemic will be really important as you continue to try to engage people. And then next week, we're going to kick off with talk about sort of how to leverage the gig economy and specifically contract workers. So if you have had contract workers leading up to this, sort of how do you keep them engaged as they continue to work remotely, which a lot of them probably already did, but how do you leverage them with your other workforce, and what is it like for them to re-engage versus the other people that may be on your staff? And if you don't have any contract workers, is that part of your new plan? And what are sort of some tips and ways to engage contract workers, and what could be the new way to work? We're also then going to talk about childcare considerations. And this one, I will admit, is a little bit of a hot topic for me as I think about the implications of, being a parent and having my kids. Fortunately, are teenagers and relatively self-sufficient, although I get concerned when the house is too quiet. But really, thinking about going back to the office in one way or another with the reality that, at least right now, the daycares continue to be closed until the end of June. And I know we're working on maybe trying to open up those a little bit earlier, but the reality is that schools are closed too. So how do you juggle that? And so we'll have perspectives from an employer, from an employee who's a mother, and also a daycare provider to talk about what you can expect as you start to bring your kids back into a daycare setting. And then last but not least, next week, we'll talk about facilities and office planning. And that's a huge, big topic as we really try to understand what are all the safety precautions that we need as we think about social distancing and keeping our employees safe, which is really first and foremost. And then the first week in June, we'll talk about employment law. And I know we've done a ton of this, but I will also say that every time we do an employment law update, it is packed because things really change. And I often hear Dan Klein, who does a lot of these updates for us, say, oh, this just changed last night, or we just got this revision this morning. And so I think there's a lot going on. And as we roll back, there'll be a lot of employee relations issues. So it's not just what's happening under COVID right now and what we should be doing in terms of offering options and flexible work and stuff like that. We're going to have a whole host of different issues as we return back to work and people continue to be fearful. And then we're going to talk on the afternoon of the 2nd about how Boston Medical Center, specifically their HR team, how they've just reshaped work, and specifically what some of the committees they've put together and how they're thinking about bringing people back and who comes back and how, and a lot of the sort of nitty gritty in a fair amount of detail about how they're dealing with some of this. And then we actually had so much content, as if these next 3 weeks weren't enough, that we're adding some more on June 9th. So for the same price that you paid for this entire series, we'll be adding more content on June 9th. So stay tuned for that. And I'm going to just start now by introducing my panelists. I first want to thank them all because, as I mentioned in the beginning, HR really has been at the front line. So I know everyone that's on this panel this morning is beyond stretched. And yet they were gracious enough to offer us an hour of their time this morning to have a conversation about, you know, what life has been like for them since this pandemic, the impact on their individual organizations from a, you know, financial standpoint, an impact on their employees, and then a little bit about themselves and, you know, what sort of leadership strengths have they had to muscle through, and how have they managed their own emotions around this? Because unlike the financial crisis, there's so much fear based in what we're going through right now, and none of us are immune to that. So, and then we're going to just talk a little bit about how they're getting their employees back to work and what that might look like. So I'm going to do some quick introductions, and then I'll allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves and set a little bit of context. We will be doing Q&A. So as Alex mentioned, if you have questions, we'll save them until the end. But if you just pop them in there, that will help us sort of filter them and make sure that we save some time for the end of our session. All right, so here we go. My hard work is done, other than managing time. So let's start with Barry. Again, just, you know, tell us a little bit about yourself and the organization that you work for, and sort of what life has been like in the last, boy, I think it's been 10 or 11 weeks now. Oh, Barry, you're on mute.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. You know, Tracy was very kind in thanking the panelists and saying that we've, you know, devoted this time where we're busy, and we are busy, but I'm actually looking forward to today's conversation because, like many of you, I've been inundated for the past several weeks with many conversations that start with, you know what you should do? So I'm sure that resonates with many of you, and so it's good to be among friends. So as Tracy mentioned, I'm Barry Gale, CHRO of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. We are financial services a company, probably quite obviously. We are small in that, small but mighty, 210 employees. We have a regional coverage in our business model of the 6 New England states. And we are physically located in one location in the Prudential Tower in Back Bay, Boston. We are a heavily exempt population, a lot of analytical types, a lot of advanced degrees, some very smart people. So I have to keep a low profile or otherwise I'll get exposed. But I think one of the things that's really striking me about this experience at a 100,000 foot level is sort of diametrically opposed. Number one, how almost seamlessly or effectively we've moved from being a not very friendly to work remotely company to 100% remote in a matter of a few weeks through the efforts of a number of folks, and how that's been working exceptionally well with very few hurdles or bumps along the way. So that's one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is as an HR person and somebody who is frequently trying to get things done through indirect influence of others, how hard that is to do remotely. Because as many of you, I've been on one form of video conference after another for the last several weeks, and that's very helpful, but also way too much written communication for my liking, lots of emails, lots of text messages. You can't see body language, you can't read tone. I'm finding it very, very difficult to effectively handle some of those responsibilities. So that's my kind of big picture stuff, and I'll hand it off to whoever's next on the list.
Great. I'll go alphabetical. So Jane. Oh, you're muted.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great, as Barry says, it's great to be here. It's great to be talking to people and seeing people. I've been home about 10 weeks now. I am the Senior Vice President of HR and Training with Digital Federal Credit Union. Most of you know us as DCU. We are a $9 billion credit union. We have just shy of 1,500 employees, 23 branches between Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So we've been pretty busy over the last 10 weeks. And I think, just to echo what Barry, it's just been a crazy time, in a matter of one weekend back in March, we had to move almost 1,200 people from the office to work from home. And unlike Barry's work environment, most of our work is our hourly employees. We have a 300-person call center. We had to move that home. We have branches that we, in essence, had to shut down and just operate drive-throughs. It's been a very challenging time, but it's been a learning experience, and I know all of us will share that. What I think, if there's any good from this experience, what I think it's really kind of put us as HR professionals on level ground. We're all experiencing the same things. We're all learning as we go. We're learning, what we do well and what we really need to work on. I know I've learned the importance of communication, and certainly, as I think Tracy mentioned earlier, just the human element, the emotions that are involved with something like this, with working from home. What we thought might be so great, some of our staff is saying, I always wanted to work from home, but maybe this isn't so great. We were not a workforce that was really embracing work from home. We had a few people that work from home. Yes, we are getting those questions. Are we going to continue that? And we're really trying to figure out how do we do that well and still maintain the culture of DCU that we have been really, I don't want to say famous for, but the reason people come to DCU to work is a lot for the culture. So it has been really a growth experience for myself personally as an HR professional, and I'm sure my peers would say that as well. But I'm excited to be able to share my experiences and learn from everyone else. And we're all in this together.
Great, thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Tracy.
Mike Tufts.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Tufts. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer at the Norfolk and Dedham Group. We are a Massachusetts-based, predominantly Massachusetts-based property casualty insurance carrier. So we write things like your home, auto. We do a lot of commercial business. We have a small operation in New Jersey, small operation in Virginia, and several people kind of all over the Eastern Seaboard who work remotely full time. Our organization is a long-standing tradition of in the office, kind of limited work from home, and kind of like what Barry and Jane alluded to. We pulled the plug and we went fully work from home 100% on March 16th, and we've been there ever since. So raise your hand if you're utterly exhausted from 10 weeks of isolation, because I am. And it's great to be here.
My dog loves it.
Right. My kids love it. There's no boundaries. And so, the lines are blurred, all the cliches you want to put out there. But I think in this scenario, HR leaders have been so essential in helping organizations respond, react, recover, keep the operations flowing. And I've never been, more proud of my team, more proud of the profession than I am now. And so I just want to put that out there for everybody. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to answer any question I possibly can, help in any way I possibly can for everyone that's out there. So fire the questions away. And, from a leadership perspective, I think, you got to be true to yourself. You got to understand your purpose, and you have to stick to your core principles. And, our core principle throughout this thing has been the safety and well-being of our employees and their families. And if you start there, you can't go wrong. And good news is we've been able to stick through this entire process. And, that we're doubling down on that now with we are an essential business like the others, and we're doubling down on that now with the return to work. So this is a very, very good topic for us to be kind of going after today.
Great. Mike's actually playing dual roles because next week he's part of the logistics facilities panel with Andy Porter from Relay Therapeutics. So we appreciate you, doing this 2 weeks in a row and sharing your expertise around that facility stuff. It looks like you might be in the office.
I am. I came in the office today, and I'm going to be in here Friday. I haven't been in the office literally. I've been here once in 10 weeks. I'm the only person here, so I had to turn the building alarm off and everything. So
it's a good thing you know how to do
my procedures.
All right, Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma Woodthorpe. I'm the Chief HR Officer of Mercury Systems. We're actually a defense electronics company, so very different to the other three. We're headquartered in Andover, so we are not in Boston. We have 21 sites worldwide, so this is not just a Massachusetts issue. We have sites in California, in New Jersey that have been hard hit. We have sites in Switzerland, in Spain, in the UK. In fact, our Spanish side is still under lockdown. Spain is figuring out what it's going to do. We're also a manufacturing company, which means although we were deemed essential as defense industry was, 40% of our people are still on site. So we've been dealing with a different issue of, first of all, in 48 hours, getting 60% of our people off site and telling 40% you have to remain, and building the trust that you need to actually be able to have 40% of your people still come in, feel safe. And very much, as Mike said, our number one mantra through all of this has been protecting the health, safety, and livelihood of our employees and their families. And so very quickly we have done a number of things, recognizing asking our employees to come on site was a big deal, and both from a facility and feeling and health and safety on the facility and the support they needed from mental, financial, and physical to make sure they felt comfortable. I would say we've had no employee turn around to us and say, I don't feel safe coming in, which is, I think, both a telling of what we've done, as well as what I would say is one of the most extraordinary groups of employees I've ever had the privilege to work with, who have really shown and stood up for what they believe around our purpose and supporting our customer, which in the end is the military and the men and women in uniform. It has been an interesting time. I don't think I've created as many programs in 10 weeks in my entire career, pulled out things I never thought were possible, but it definitely has brought HR to the front. I'm sure, as everybody knows, I think the effort, again, I've used this word extraordinary a lot recently because I think it's true. I think the effort from HR and others has been extraordinary to pull what we've done in 10 weeks. Think about what you've done in 10 weeks that normally you probably couldn't have got done in 2 years. And that's what we've done. And now, yeah, the return to work, much more difficult. But we're still, I think everyone is up for the challenge. And again, HR is at the front. This is a human issue. This is not a financial issue.
Yep, absolutely. I thought it was interesting, and we talked offline a little bit about the article from The Economist last month, stating that the CFOs had got us, out of the recession, and the HR leaders are going to pull us out of this pandemic. And I think just the word hard-headed, the article alluded to the fact that sometimes HR is considered soft because it's the people side. And I found that terminology interesting because the connotation is that you have to be hard-headed to make difficult decisions, but yet soft in order to make sure that you're dealing with the people stuff. And that's where the complexity comes in. It's not that the numbers and the other business operations aren't complex, but I think that when you're dealing with human beings, it's never just a straight line, because you're also, especially in this situation, dealing with a lot of fear and things like that. So I'm curious, and I'll start with Barry, about we've all sort of alluded to leadership in this time. And I'm curious to hear from you about, what are the couple of things that you think from your own leadership standpoint, and then maybe of the larger C team at FHL, is like, what are the couple of things that are really needed right now? I mean, I'm sure some of them are obvious, but what are you what do you feel like you're digging deep for in this crisis, and maybe what are you seeing around you?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. It's really interesting because one of the things that really jumps out to me as being unique about this situation is the removal from our familiar surroundings. And whenever we land on a new planet, there's that period of discovery where you're really not sure what's going on. And I think a lot of us have felt that way over the past several weeks, that, if you go to your commonly used skills and capabilities, some of them still work great and still apply, and some of them don't work so good. And you have to sort of reach into the toolkit and say, all right, what do I do now? From a leadership perspective, I think one of the things that's really jumped out to me is the fact that we're all at a different point on the continuum in terms of introversion, extroversion. And I think the extrovert is far more both benefited and probably harmed by this environment. Benefited, and then as a leader, you're the kind of person that's probably going to be reaching out to people and pinging them more often. Hey, how you doing? How's it going? Do you have everything you need? And of course, we know that that's absolutely critical for employee engagement as well as just business productivity in general. That extrovert also gets harmed because there's the pain of the isolation. Mm-hmm. And, some of us who are extroverts get our energy from being around other people. And when that's taken away, it's sort of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, so you find that. Conversely, for our leaders that are more introverts, it's been a little bit of a challenge in terms of saying, hey, I know you don't have an agenda or scheduled meetings with people, but we've got this technology in place, whatever your organization's using, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, what have you, and you should be reaching out, you should be connecting, you should be talking to people, letting them see you, letting them experience you, wearing your slippers and with your hair sticking up at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's helpful because it sort of puts us all on the same, playing field. And I think it really helps drive that engagement and helps people center around, what's most important. So I think, summing up the response, I think having a clear understanding of who we are as individuals and how we work is so critical. And I would acknowledge that it took me a few weeks to sort of wrap my head around that a little bit. I headed into this first week, I think as Mike said, we were out as of March 16th, so it's been just over 8 weeks now. The first 2-3 weeks, it was sort of like, all right, I'm working from home. And then I realized, no, this is a deeper thought process that needs to take place.
Yeah, you actually have to settle in. It's not a, temporary. Now we're settling in, and so now what sort of thing. Jane, I'm curious about you from your own leadership standpoint. Where do you feel like you're flexing a little bit, and then also what are you seeing in your leadership team at DCU?
Well, certainly. Well, first of all, I hope Barry was speaking for himself about hair sticking up at 7, because that's never happened with me. Okay. No. Anyways, as a lead, what I've seen in our organization, it's almost like now, we have a set of guiding principles at DCU of doing the right thing, make a difference, and people come first. And we try to live those, principles out every day. But this situation has really brought, are we really walking what we're saying, our talk? And just recognizing that people, life can be messy, and people's lives outside affect their work so much. And now we're finding that out. People are at home. They might be struggling because a spouse is out of work, or they have no childcare. They're a single parent, or maybe they're living with an elderly relative or a family member, and they're concerned about going out and bringing it back to the place. So it's been all those types of emotions. And as a leadership team, we really had to kind of sit down and realize the human side of it. But we have realized that, we're all vulnerable, and that what can we do every day to best help our employees and our members? A lot of it has been around just being authentic and just the communication piece. We try to communicate. At the beginning, we were sending out messages to our employees every single day. And then now we're down to 3 times a week. And sometimes we say, oh gosh, do we have much to say today? But even with just saying, you know, we're still here. We're working on it. We don't have all the answers. We're trying to put this plan back together to come back. And, you know, we're just giving some positive messages we've received from members of how we've helped them, or an employee, how we just connecting with them. We've gotten great feedback from employees. We just wanted to hear, and it's sent out from our CEO, and how important that communication is. And I think as a leader, what we've learned is how you have to be adaptable. You know, we had put our plan together to come back. And then just yesterday, when Governor Baker's plan came out, he said, okay, you can only have 25% of your capacity in. Now we have to go back, and, you know, we didn't think that. We were putting all the plans in place to social distance, but it was more than 25%. So now we have to go back and look at the plan. So you have to be, you know, people throw around the word nimble, but you have to say, okay, now we have to go back, and you just have to be willing to be flexible. But for me personally, it's being comfortable with telling people, we don't know. We're going to try our best. We're learning as we go along. We want you to be safe, but also balancing with the fact that, you know, this is a business and we still have to serve our members. And how do we do both? So it has been a tremendous learning experience.
Right. And to navigate those conversations and having so much of the unknown. I think that and I'm not political, but I'm going to say I am a big Charlie Baker fan. And I've watched him through this. I was a big fan before all of this happened, and more so just because of how he leads. You know, he was a business leader before this as a CEO of Harvard Pilgrim, but just watching his press conferences and the ability to, as you guys have pointed out, like his comfort level, his authenticity, his willing to communicate every single day, even if that's not normally what he would do or want to do or be comfortable with. And so many times saying, I don't know, or, you know, not just trying to appease every person that was asking a question, but just saying, you know, I don't know. And some people don't like that answer, but it's better than some sort of scripted, you know, speech that doesn't feel like we're getting the full picture. So little plug for Charlie Baker. Mike.
So you're not alone in your love of Charlie Baker. Hillary Tufts also loves Charlie Baker. So put that out there. You know, I think authenticity, Tracy, is the word in this leadership time. We don't have all the answers. You know, we didn't go into this with a playbook, you know, on how to respond. And I think in terms of leadership, you know, these words matter. They're meaningful. You know, agility. You know, you can say nimble or adaptable. We use the word agility. And I think when you talk about communication, transparency, authenticity, that's what I've seen people respond to most effectively. And I think in times like this, you know, the strength of your culture, of your organization can really shine through, and the engagement levels across your employee base, you know, become really obvious. And so you have people, you know, doing everything they possibly can to, you know, get processes moved off site, to run manual things from their homes, to put equipment in their homes, to, you know, get the workflows, keep them moving, keep the process flow going. You know, I think as leaders, you got to be mindful of that stuff, the wear and tear on people that takes. We're at, you know, kind of like week 9 or 10 now. It's time to, you know, transition back, and people need to know that we're there for them. And so we've doubled down on agility, transparency, authenticity, communication, and we've kind of let it flow that way. And it's worked for us.
Great. So it dawns on me that I said we're going to have a conversation. Yeah, I'm going person by person, but I want to let Emma go, and then maybe we can open it up a little bit. I do have some other questions, of course, and we'll start to filter some questions, but feel free to play off of each other. I know that you're putting yourselves on mute in between just out of courtesy, but again, feel free to jump in, and I'll let Emma tell us about her leadership and what she's been experiencing.
Yeah, so I find that really interesting that, you know, soft versus hard-headed. And I actually think that's dependent on industry and culture. You know, we are in an industry that, as I said, is deemed essential, and the defense industry has not been impacted. We have not had to furlough We've not had to lay off, which I'm incredibly grateful for. I still remember the 2001 where I shuttered a company in the dot-com crash, and 2008. So incredibly grateful I'm not in that situation. However, I'll tell a quick story. We do have 40% of our people on site, and our aim has to be keeping contagion off our sites. And that's why we send 6% home, to de-risk our manufacturing operations. And we heard stories of people still going out at the weekends and seeing their families. And we're like, what are they thinking? And my leadership team's getting madder and madder and madder, our employees, and they're about to send out a dictate. Thou shalt not go do stuff. And I said, whoa. I want you to read an article. I want you to read an article, an HBR article, and I sent it out. It's called "That Discomfort You're Feeling is Grief." And if you haven't read it, read it. Because I said, everything we do has to head through the lanes of kindness and empathy in a way we have never had to do before. And so it's interesting to say hard-headed versus soft. I actually think the soft and the acknowledgement of grief through this time of the loss of people's, personal control over their lives. Working from home is not the same. You can't go to a coffee shop and work. You're at home, and acknowledging that. And so we turned all of our leadership around everything we did, all the transparency around the lens of our cultures and values. We're a very caring company. We get results. We're very innovative, but added this lens of kindness and empathy to it. And I think that was a huge shift for us. And our employees responded. So instead of us saying, don't do this, we said, look, here's why we need you not to do this. We need you because we're trying to protect your jobs. We're trying to not shut down a site. And here's the protocol we have if we have to shut down a site. 14 days of no revenue, guys. We're going to pay you. So you're not going to lose out, but the company and our customer will. And that's what we're trying to solve. And our employees went, okay, we get it now. And thank you for the support. And so I think actually some softness in this, and again, it depends on what you're dealing with, has actually been our power in our engagement with our employees.
Yeah. That sort of leads me, so I'll start with you, Emma. Another question that I have, we could be here forever because even though I got to prep with you guys yesterday, I have all other things stirring around in my head. But one of the things that we've seen in a lot of companies is innovation. So, I think even from a NEHRA perspective, we've had webinars. Alex has led our webinars for many years, but we weren't doing a lot of programming online, and we had made some investments in technology and started to lean in that direction, again, led by Alex. But boy, we learned quickly. We turned it around really quickly. I think the third week in March, we did our HR basics, developing the HR fundamentals online. And so, some of that's innovation, some of it's just like you guys have all talked about, you do it because you have to. And so I'm curious, and I'll start with Emma, like what kind of innovation have you seen either within your own HR team, maybe, in how you're doing things, or as a company at large? Like, have you been able to spin this to create something else or do something differently?
Yeah, so first of all, thank goodness for Zoom and Skype for Business and all of those. We didn't have to move a single phone home. People picked up their laptop, what we call a hockey puck of a speaker, and off they went. So that, thank God we put that technology in, as many as you did, or many of you managed to get in since, I'm sure. That was a huge win for us, that we were able to move very quickly. I saw, we did so much. Within 48 hours, we'd put a $1 million relief fund in place for our employees. We'd paid every hourly employee who went on site $250 off the bat, and then they could get more money. We still have that relief fund going, and every week we get claims. It's if you're in financial crisis. We turned our peer-to-peer platform into a thanker recognition platform into a thanker health worker fund. So we have a platform where you can donate points and say thank you to each other. We set up a redemption where employees could give points to a fund, and we gave, in dollar value, they gave about 15,000 points. Mercury gave about 70,000 points. And they could actually request $50 gift certificates to give to health workers that they knew, to say thank you for everything. We depleted nearly $90,000 in less than 2 weeks, and 1,700 went out there. I've seen everything from Jeopardy, online Jeopardy. My team came up with online Jeopardy. I have no idea how they did it. So I've seen everything from how do we stay social to these bigger things, bringing Carrot Work in less than a week, bringing Headspace in less than a week.
Yeah.
We're about to bring in online counseling in less than a week. Just, things, again, that appetite for support. I haven't had a single pushback from a leader yet on that's, in terms of money. It's like we found the way to do this within our financials and get it out there. So yeah, I mean, you let people run free. It's amazing, the innovation, but I'm seeing it all over our company in terms of connections and what people are doing to stay connected, coffee mornings, happy hours. It's incredible when you let people loose what they can do.
Yeah, absolutely. You sort of take down the constraints. Anyone else experiencing some innovation that they'd like to share?
Well, Tracy, similar to you, we didn't have any training online or orientation. So we sent my learning and development team home mid-March, and we said, look, by April 20th, we need to have online training. So they delivered online orientation, online training, did an incredible job. And now that's made us look at all our programs and how we can offer it online so people don't have to drive from branches or other buildings to come in for training. Like Emma, there's been online coffee hours, happy hours. Some team developed an online scavenger hunt. I don't know how they did that. As an organization, we gave every employee 4 additional weeks of sick because as a company over 500, we weren't held to the Family First Act. For those employees that are working on site, we're giving them a stipend. All food in the cafeteria, which is all prepackaged, is free. You just grab and go for breakfast and lunch. We worked with our EAP to offer more programs on, mindfulness and wellness. And so it's just really, it's unfortunate that sometimes crisis cause us to be innovative, but some really great things have come out of this and that we want to continue, so.
Yeah, I think there's just sort of this underlying, so that's the innovation, like from a business standpoint, great. Like we learn, we adapt. Some of it's adapting and some of it's when you think of things in a different way, you start to become more innovative. But then also just this core need to connect and to somehow give back or help, because that's one of the other underlying feelings is, we've lost so much control. And so the ability to just, do some kind of fundraising or make sure that, other people are taken care of. I've checked in on my neighbor who, frankly, other than just waving every once in a while, she and I haven't connected like this. And we chat like once a week and make sure each other's okay. And she's like in her early 80s and she's a lot better, I think, some days than I am. But, those things that maybe that you just stop and think a little bit differently about things. I don't know, Barry or Mike, if you're seeing stuff in your organizations, either from a business standpoint or what your employees might be doing to sort of rally around some of this?
Yeah, I would say that just building on Emma and Jane's commentary, my conversation is about little I, not necessarily big I innovation. But, if you think about traditionally, as if you're part of a leadership team and you're going to have a strategy conversation, what's the first thing you do? You schedule an offsite. Why do you have an offsite? You need to get people out of that familiar zone, away from stuff that's the normal day-to-day, that sort of puts our thinking and our thought processes, I think, on a track or more of in a box. It limits kind of what we do. And so this whole remote work thing has been a huge exercise in doing exactly that, only not just for the leadership team, for every single employee in the organization is now out of that familiar zone. And they're thinking about really cool things. So like Emma and Jane mentioned, our organization's leveraged some of the new technology, some really neat things on Microsoft Teams. Something as simple as the Wellness Committee created a Microsoft Teams for wellness, and people are posting pics and doing challenges with each other in terms of what they're doing on their spare time and their bike rides and their mountain climbing and all this stuff. And the thing that strikes me is there's a breaking down of barriers that existed before, that this whole situation has created this opportunity for people to see each other in a completely different light and experience relationships that never would have happened had we not been in this environment. So it's just a really interesting exercise in sort of human nature, I think.
Yeah, I think we've had similar experience. I think in a weird way, this situation has allowed us to take the shackles off, so to speak, in terms of, actioning any number of things that were, pent up in that innovation zone. Because, day to day, week to week, you get stuff done, and advancing that process or this process kind of falls by the wayside. But, I think innovation is relative too. It's relative to where your organization is, what your organization does. So for us, something as simple as, paper-based processes are now fully electronic. It's like a massive step forward for, a mutual insurance company. And so we're doing it. We've embraced it. Our HR team has converted paper processes to fully electronic. It's great. It's these little steps that you take make a massive difference in the long run. And so I think innovation has, this thing has spawned innovation. It's a horrible, horrible situation for the people that have been impacted by it. And this from a business perspective, there is this silver lining of, we have kind of been unleashed to change the way we do things and not really have to get consensus on it. So you can rapid fire, just, okay, we're going to change this, we're going to change that, we're going to change this, we're going to change, and then you action it. So, we've experienced that like full on.
So I want to kind of move into this, as you transition back, and I know each of you are playing, as many heads of HR have been playing a big role up until this time in managing the situation. But now, as we're trying to think about getting back, you're playing equally, if not bigger, roles in that. So I'm going to start with Mike and ask about, so what is your role in, whatever the new normal is? I really hate that term, but what is your sort of role in leading people back to whatever your next phase of this is, meaning, as we transition back to work, or people are going to work remotely and that kind of thing. Sort of what's the role that you're playing, and kind of what is Norfolk Dedham's sort of approach to this, and how you're dealing with everything from logistically, because I know we're going to talk about logistically next week, but also just philosophically how you're managing that.
I think something that Emma echoed and everyone's echoed, really, the safety and well-being of our employees and their families, number one. That drives our thinking. The role I play specifically is I'm also the business continuity planning chairperson for the company. And so we were talking yesterday, it's like the CHROs, the HR executives, first chair on this, ironically enough, where we weren't the last time around. And, I think rightfully so. So kind of that first chair, working very closely with the executive team to facilitate, the rollout of a phased approach. So we're not going to come. We're an essential business, but we're not coming back in here even at 25%. We're going to come back in here maybe at 5 to 7%, really with just core processes that need to come back from people's homes to this building. And then we're going to, sort of July 1st as kind of the next wave of maybe 10% of our people. So we're going very measured, very slow, very methodical, and we have the luxury to do that because our response has been incredibly successful, and our staff have been amazing. So we're going to leverage that. We're going to stay agile throughout. Obviously, the lieutenant governor yesterday laid out the mandatory workplace safety standards. We all have to implement those as an essential business. I think the deadline's Monday. Get that stuff in place. So I think.
Do it.
Pardon?
You can do it.
Yeah, it's work all weekend. It's okay. No, I don't think that those. I think if we've been planning thoughtfully all along, like a super heavy lift, you just got to make sure you're compliant. And so that you got to take these things sequentially, and you got to take these things and you have to stick to your core principles. And so our core principles are, safety of our employees, follow the governor's guidance, and action things that positively impact our stakeholders.
Right, right.
And if you can keep it simple like that, you're set up for success.
I would imagine even in that though, that, you're the voice of that, right? Because there's got to be other people in the organization, other leaders saying, well, why do we have to do this, or why do we have to do that? Or, sort of to Emma's point, like, we should just be telling people what they have to do, like mandating it. So, tell us about just that constant need to influence and, either soften a message or explain, why something might be important tied to the safety or the compliance piece.
Yeah, that's a big challenge for me because I've always been a super collaborative person, and I like an iterative process to develop solutions. But I have to be that hard-headed CHRO in this scenario. So, I think you have to choose which behavior, which emotion. You have to be very specific when you think about, okay, I'm sticking to my guns on the safety of our employees is the number one thing. And anytime something crosses that threshold, I'm gonna push back hard. Yeah. So you have to. It takes. That's out of my comfort zone. That's not my top skill. And I think Barry was alluding to before. Like, we're drawing on skills. Maybe in some cases we didn't know we had. Maybe we're way down that strength finder list. Maybe at the top now. But, so I think that's something I've experienced, and I'm sure that many of our colleagues are experiencing. And so playing that hard-headed role, you got to do it. You got to pick the spots to do it. The challenge with this whole thing is even now, even after, several months of living through, this COVID world, everyone looks at this thing differently. Everyone still looks at it differently from their own perspective. You hear from time to time, oh, it's no worse than the flu. Like, people say that, like, it's not. It is worse. It's a lot worse. And you constantly have to push back, and there's myriad viewpoints on, Charlie Baker's been too conservative for this or that. Like, I don't get caught up in that stuff.
Right.
I stick to the core principles we've agreed on as a leadership team, and I'm driving those things until the CEO tells me to stop.
Yeah, I would just reinforce what Mike's saying in terms of the challenge. And this is not unique or new for CHROs or the HR community that's out there. We're constantly in that 1 foot in, needing to interpret policy as an example, but then also factor in a case-by-case basis. Well, the two can't coexist. Either there's a policy that drives a decision, or you're going to factor in other things to make a decision. I feel like in this scenario, I've been in that mode far more frequently than I've ever been before. So as an example, there are some policies that might exist or apply to these situations. In many cases, there aren't any, they don't exist. And then I think one of the points that's been made multiple times here is things like the principles, guiding principles or values of your organization. When do they come to life, if not at a time like this? I mean, this is really when to leverage those. And by the way, if your leaders or decision makers are giving you the hairy eyeball or sort of shrugging their shoulders when you bring that up, then there's a different conversation to have, which is, well, we identified the wrong things here, but this is what's in place, and this is what we have to work with right now. That, step in as the hard-headed CHRO, we need to go this direction, and then almost simultaneously stepping back and saying, tell me more. I want to hear more from you about what's going on and what's happening. That dance is really difficult to get right, I think, on a day after day after day basis.
Yeah, especially when you're communicating like this, right? You're not having a face-to-face verbal, let's go grab a cup of coffee, kind of, look you in the eye sort of thing. I'm curious from Emma and Jane too.
Yeah, so it was interesting. So, I knew we were going to hit, because we're not a work from home company. We never have been. And I knew we were going to hit that. What do we do? And I knew our leadership team, even though necessarily weren't all talking about it, weren't aligned. And so about 6 weeks ago, there are certain companies we love to look at. we love to benchmark against, and they're big companies. So I started just dripping and saying, did you know Google has now said not till next year? And oh, by the way, Raytheon just said potentially without a vaccine, some of their people are going to stay home. So started to talk about companies that we look to and admire and bringing the information, and started leading them down this path of, we're not all coming back, guys, and let's get our heads around this, because I don't think it's happening potentially this year. And so by the time we actually brought the presentation, we'd all got, the leaders had all got their heads around that. And we've actually built a 4-phase approach. We're calling ourselves, right now we're in shelter. So kind of in that shelter, in that lockdown, a half hour, 6% off site. We are then going to move to what we call the bridge phase, which is not a new normal. It's a phase of not everyone's back. It's kind of on our way there, which will happen no earlier than June 6th. And we'll target less than 150 of our employees coming back. We have over 2,000 employees. Then we'll kind of what we're calling a flex phase, which is that phase where a STEM, we're going to have to flex in and out. And we don't think that's going to happen until October. And then maybe an accelerate is what we're looking at after a vaccine has been developed. Mm-hmm. What we've recognized is we're in this for the long haul. We were on the first out. Our mantra is we will not be first back. And we will work on that with those considerations. And then we're also, we've also got a group that's looking at the future of work and saying, what does this do for us in the next 2 years? Because it's going to be hard to come back from some of this as people find they work better remotely. What does this mean for us long term? Right. So we thought very hard about this, but the same as many of you, abundance of caution, and being able to reverse very, very quickly. I think we are going to probably find ourselves in bridge and may have to come back to shelter. Yeah. And that's important.
Yeah, that agility. So believe it or not, we only have a couple of minutes left. I want to let Jane, and no questions. So you snooze, you lose.
Okay. So at DCU, we've put a plan in place to gradually start beginning to bring people back in June. As I said, with the governor's saying no more than 25%, we had to tweak a little bit. So we're starting to bring people back in phases, and it's more what Emma had mentioned was the flexing in and out. We're going to begin to start that right away with coming in for a period of time. You'll stay in a group and you'll go back, and we've put a plan in place together that we could continue to use this plan through the rest of the year, where we might never all be in the same place together. We started a little differently, that we put together a cross group of managers and directors and said, hey, why don't you come up with some options and present it to the senior team? They did that. There was a lot of tweaking back and forth, and now we have a plan in place. What it did, though, is because we were never a company that was really a remote company, we have now put together a small group of individuals to look at what's the future of remote work here at DCU going forward. How do you keep our culture? How do you maintain productivity? How do you manage? So that's at least a conversation now that's really going to be at the forefront, which in the past there might be a one-off, a few people here and there, especially in our IT area that worked from home. So it's really opened the door to the future of remote work at DCU. But we're just going to take it step by step, because as we know, we don't know what tomorrow will bring, but our plan is to start June 1st with putting all the safety things in place. We have a lot of them in place right now because we do have staff working in-house. So many of those things, the mask wearing, the disinfecting, the cleaning, all of that is in place right now. So.
Great, excellent. So as we wrap up, one of the things that I think that, so you've described a lot of different leadership qualities, including agility and authenticity and really communication and, the hard head and the soft head. But one of the words that didn't come up that strikes me is courage. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time to dive into that, but what I would offer to you is that, you are all really courageous. And I think that you have to be in HR in a lot of ways, because even though the stakes are really high right now, I think even in general, as we lead organizations, and especially as we've moved to, more employee-centric work environments, that HR really is at the forefront. I remember I was on a panel about 15 years ago, and maybe 20, it was a long time ago. And someone was talking about, where the role of HR, and I said, I think, and the path to the CEO role. And I said, I think HR people would make great CEOs. And there was a few people that were kind of like, really? And I said, absolutely. And, you know, and here are all the reasons why. So you know, disregard all the technical stuff. I mean, if you know your business and you know your people, you know, you're really, and you have a lot of courage, then, you know, you really can make a big difference. And I think, you know, each of the four of you, without saying it, have displayed some level of courage, whether it's dealing with your CEOs or the emotions of your employees or your fellow peers. So we appreciate that about you. And again, I appreciate you taking the time this morning. We are 1 minute past already, so I'm supposed to wrap up at 10:55. These guys know I rarely end on time. Alex, do you have, I know we're gonna do a quick 5-minute break, but again, thank you to Mike and Barry and Jane and Emma for your time this morning and your insight. We really do appreciate it. And don't be surprised if I ask you back for round 2.
Thank you.
Happy to.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Tracy.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Tracy. Thank you, Alex.